eat well, and know your food, and also make a virtue out of a necessity. You need to eat, so learn how to cook. And so now you can have the fun of cooking with your family, your friends, and you have the social environment. Always pay it forward somehow. Even if it's a small thing, like helping someone to pick up a bag of shopping or just something like that they can't do. It has a really good effect on your just general well-being.
Our next guest, Zack Varkaris, is the scientific director and founder of Austin Biotec. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Marine and Molecular Biology from Herat University. He is impacting longevity and health, working by the ethos. A functional reproductive system and aesthetic maintenance is the foundation for a fully extended life. Zack is working on technologies that can extend lifespan by up to 20 years. And better yet, imagine having those increased 20 years of life full of youth and vitality. That is exactly why you are here listening to this podcast.
PRP, platelet-rich plasma, which is the product from the blood, which is basically the red stuff, the blood cells. But the issue with PRP is...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. This is a longevity podcast first and a health podcast second. Our next guest is working on technologies that can extend lifespan by up to 20 years. And better yet, imagine having those increased 20 years of life full of youth and vitality. That is exactly why you are here listening to this podcast. I met our next guest, Zack Varkaris, last year at the Biohacking Expo in Miami. By the way, he is speaking at the next event next year, so that's February 28th through March 1st in 2025. We had a great conversation and rapport from the very beginning, and I was interested in knowing more about the exciting things he is doing related to fertility, longevity, and a thing he calls Freudenspanne. Zack Varkaris is the scientific director and founder of Austin Biotec. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Marine and Molecular Biology from Herat University, if I said that right. He is impacting longevity and health, working by the ethos. A functional reproductive system and aesthetic maintenance is the foundation for a fully extended life. Zack, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice intro. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I've seen a number of your interviews, and when I think back to when we first met, it was clear to me how passionate you are about what you do. So I'd like to get a little bit of background. I hear a little bit of an accent. Can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up, life at home, maybe where you think this passion, and specifically a passion for helping others, comes from?
Oh, that's a hell of a lot to do in the morning.
Unpack that.
Yeah, okay. Well, so the accent, it doesn't sound southern to you, you know. I grew up in London. I'm actually of Greek extraction, but I grew up there. Went to university. Just wanted to do marine biology, and molecular was my other half of my degree, but it wasn't as much fun as marine biology because you're out in the ocean all the time. Marine biology, when you're 19, that's the best thing ever. But what I discovered was that I loved finding out about things, inquiring about things, and just seeing what happens and testing hypotheses and making them work. And I think to say helping other people, did I consciously do that? I don't know. I think what we do is we bumble along in life and we try and do the right thing, and it happens the way it happens. And if you're lucky, you get it right. And if you're unlucky, you're vilified. You know, it's that kind of thing. So, but I found over a period of time that very often within the science community, we tend to be very focused in our channels. And we say we're sort of groundbreaking, but we're not really. We don't really think outside the box very often. Partly because we can't, and partly because it's scary to do it. But I decided to have a life and travel around as a bit of a surfer and things like that, and just doing my little things. And from that, I discovered the joys of fertility. And so from that, I noticed about 2011, 13 years ago that there was a fertility crisis going on, not just the fact that people weren't having children, but they physically couldn't have children. And some of my friends were having issues having children, and they were going through IVF and things like that. And you could see them having aging issues. You could see them almost aging visibly overnight. And anyway, the long and the short of it is they ended up succeeding. And I sort of put my mind to some of these things. And from that, it just slowly gathered pace. And 2018, we started a clinical trial on PRP to do ovarian rejuvenation. Discovered very quickly that's not very effective. And then
wait. Before we get into the science, I want to push you on one other thing that I think is pretty interesting, kind of background. And I know that's already making you nervous. You co-authored a fiction book, right? I want to get into the science, but talk a little bit about like writing fiction.
I didn't co-author it. I wrote it all by myself.
Oh, I thought there was another co-author on the thing. So you wrote a fiction book. Yeah. Great. Talk a little bit about that process, because I think this you were talking about not thinking outside the box. Like, you're a scientist who wrote a fiction book, like that's outside the box. Maybe those interplay. I like to understand kind of the how your mind works.
Okay, so I'd always sort of wanted to. A bit of being Greek. It's a historical fiction book based around the parts of the Byzantine Empire. And it's really sort of loosely based on my family history. And it's a really cool piece of history. So I thought, let's tell the story. But no one wants to hear history lessons. Boring, right? So what happened was I couldn't find the sort of idea for the story. And then my father passed away. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to sit down and write it. And I came up with this idea of two brothers from Crete, which is where I'm from, fall for the same girl. One, she chooses one, not the other, and they determine the fate of two worlds, which is the Ottomans and the Byzantine Greeks. I wrote it. I thought, whatever, it was almost like cathartic. All the characters were like people in my life, and I used to jokingly call it, this could be paid therapy, right? And I'm just writing, and then every day I just wrote by pencil and paper. I'm like this because I was by the sea, and it would run the ink on the computer. So I wrote it in about 9 months, sent it off to a few publishers, and I got a bite, and I was like, okay. All right, but then I had to learn how to edit, which is very different. So there's one thing about having, the plot was fine. The plot's great, but pacing of the novel and the editing, which, as scientists, we think about, this introduction, methodology, results, conclusions. It's similar in a way, but it's different because it has to have a little flavor to it that sort of weaves the story. But actually, it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm actually writing a second book, but I haven't finished it yet because it was in editing now. But because I'm doing this, and it's taking up all my time, and there's just nothing we can do. But that's what happened, and it was fun. Yes. And it was fun, yeah. So
you said you wrote it in about 8 months. Was that 1 hour a day? You dedicated a Monday? Like what did that kind of look like?
So I was living in the Philippines at the time, and I was basically sort of living by the beach. My father died, and I basically every morning I used to get up at about 4:30 in the morning. Instead of taking the waves, I was really disciplined, and I would make sure I wrote at least 1,000 words a day, no matter what it was. And that's what I did, just steady state. And we started off at 250, went up to 500, eventually 1,000 words. And I just carried on going. And if I couldn't find something, I would just keep going, just park that for later. And I wouldn't hit the first wave until I did that writing. That was my sort of raison d'etre. So I did it.
So that's pretty awesome. That's a lot of discipline, right? Because you're there for the waves, and you don't allow yourself to hit the waves until you meet a particular kind of standard. And I'm sure you're carrying that into kind of this science that we're going to talk about here soon. So you were a founder of Pan Energy, a company producing high-value chemicals with algae. That already sounds amazing. Somehow those produced anti-aging serums. Can you talk about that? Like, what did that look like? Starting that company, creating these high-value chemicals, and then oh wait, there's an anti-aging serum here.
So we were in the energy sector, renewable energy sector. That's what I was working on at the time. And we're looking at algae into biodiesel or algae into gasoline, depending on how you do the system. And the issue with these systems is that 85% produced is diesel and 15% produced is glycerol. And glycerol is a very low value product. So it means that the economies of scale of an algae farm, you have to make a 40-acre site to make it commercially viable, which defeats the object. You've got to have a small site that you can put in a village and stuff like that. So everyone was trying to control the algae itself and prevent them from mutating into the lower energy types of algae. So it's a bit like weed plants. Some of them go into the ones that have THC and the other ones that don't. So it's the same with algae. Some have high energy and some don't. And if they mutate, the whole thing will fall apart. So we thought, why don't we try and get the 15% glycerol and change the catalyst and the temperature of the machine and put the algae in with another catalyst, and we'll get 100% diesel. Well, we tried that. It was July 4th weekend, 2011, and we failed. We got an 18.5% diesel and 15% byproduct. Well, what's this stuff? And that was methoxylated glycerols and propionediols, which is quite valuable. I think some retail as much as $10,000 a gallon, so it's quite a lot. What it is, it's used in La Prairie skin cream, Shiseido skin cream. It's a water absorbent for the skin, so it releases excess water but keeps the lipid in the actual skin. And we accidentally found a way of producing it for a tenth of the price from a green source compared to the only other manufacturer. So we're like, okay, let's do it. And then, of course, like same with the novel, it's great. Writing the novel is easy, but editing, that's much harder. Producing this chemical is easy. It's the other bit that's a lot harder. But we found that the market was limited within certain areas. But what it did is it drove us into longevity, into, wait a minute, this is like one, and so it's one of the main ingredients used in cryogenic freezing. 21st century medicine, the cryogenic freeze that they do is called 2-MDP, and that's one of the chemicals that we produced accidentally, just purely by chance. But the market again was small. But what it showed us is by thinking differently, we could create something that was working. All the other algae farms cost about $1 million to build. Ours cost equivalent size $60,000, and it was really lucky. So we found ways of working things by speaking to farmers and rice paddy people and stuff like that, and that's what we were working on, and that's what we did. And from that was the start of my longevity journey. This brought me right here to you today. So you mentioned this was kind of your first foray into longevity. Were your partners in that business kind of the same as your current business? No, they're not. They were all professors at universities, and they are still a professor at universities. And I decided that I was going. We did that business. They wanted to go into the chemical industry, the pharmaceuticals, which is there's a lot of regulation, et cetera, with cosmetics. There isn't regulation in the same way, so there's less financial burden to start with. And so we decided, we'll still speak to them, but no, I just carried on. But I went back to my roots and went back to my college friends who are all, PhDs and whatever in molecular biology, whatever they were doing. I said, hey guys, I've got this thing. What do you think? And that's what we did. And we just over.
All right, well, let's talk about that thing, right? So you had some friends, you saw them experiencing fertility problems. kind of aging in front of you, solving those, and then you start to have ideas. Your first thought process was PRP. Why did PRP come on your radar to begin with, and then what was your kind of experience with PRP?
Great question. PRP.
By the way, just for the audience, PRP is explain what PRP is also, please.
So PRP, platelet-rich plasma, which is the product from the blood, which is basically the red stuff, the blood cells. The platelet, poor plasma is the other stuff they get rid of. But we'll come to that a bit later. But the PRP is taken out. How did I come across it? Actually, I was in Greece, in Crete, and there was a few scientists there, Varkaris, was doing some research in a clinic in Heraklion in Crete. And I just happened to, it's very strange. I think when someone decides they're going to do something, they then are much more aware of what's around them in that area. And as long as you're prepared for it and you see it and you spot it, you can capitalize on it then and there. So I happened to accidentally sort of come across these guys purely by chance at a coffee place. It was really weird. And they were talking about doing PRP for PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and POF, premature ovarian failure, which is becoming more commonplace now. And they were talking about rebooting it using growth factors or the energy from the blood. And I was like, okay, let's see what they did. And that's where they started. As we know, PRP now is basically a vampire facial. But fundamentally, that was a start. But the issue with PRP is there is no genetic material in it. And it just doesn't have enough power in it to restart the system. And so, but obviously you have to start somewhere. And then you have to start somewhere with a methodology. And then you have to work and add to it or to take away from it. And it's not something, you don't just leap a mountain in one leap. It's a bunch of steps and you've got to keep going. So that was a start. And then again, it just carried on pulling the string.
Yeah. So you were in some sort of clinic helping people deal with fertility, or was there somebody in your environment like, hey, I think I can help you. I think this PRP will actually work. And then you like incorporated that. Like, how does that look? How do you first try PRP? Have you already started Austin Biotec and this is the first phase of research you're doing?
No. So what happened was, as I said, with those friends, I was pulling a string. I was trying to work out how they could be fixed, how things could be fixed. So I started to do just research on my own, just whilst I was actually writing the novel. So I just started doing research. And then obviously I was with the family in Greece, and then I came across a clinic there and then realized, wait a minute, we need to do some follow up what they're doing. So I didn't start doing my own research. I just followed them. And then eventually went back to my old classmates and said, hey guys, why don't we look at doing something? And then took that information, took some other information, put together. I mean, a lab is such a grand term, but it's a few centrifuges, whatever. But it's not really that much. But it's when we created the lab, started to work with it. And then what happened was, over a period of time, and I had some personal and family things to deal with, but over a period of time, you just start to develop knowledge and you start to develop wherewithal. And one of the things is that when you're doing the research or when you're doing the studies of these, it's a fine line. You could run out and raise a load of money and get funding, or do you just do it with your own funding but on a smaller scale? But they both have their benefits. Obviously, the first one, you can scale it up massively really quickly, but it takes a long time to tick all the boxes and make it done. Whereas if you're on the second one, you can already start. And so what we did is, instead of having 500 patients, we had 3. And we just started slowly and built up with it and then doubled it up. But it hits a critical mass. It takes some time. But with PRP, I then got involved following a clinical trial on PRP in 2018 in the United States. And there, very quickly, I noticed it just doesn't have the potency. So rather than waste the time, what I liked about that is the delivery mechanism, which is the injection procedure, not taking the cells out. It's simple, it's in vivo, bam, 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 very quickly. So that is what I took from there, and then followed up with some other research with Professor Al Hendy at the University of Chicago, who's done a pilot study on women using mesenchymal stem cells with POF, premature ovarian failure, and PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And we spoke with them and looked at that, adding stem cells to the mix instead of PRP. And that's how it happened.
And so did you see in his results like that there were, people were recovering kind of for their fertility when they weren't expected to? Is that a normal outcropping of solving PCOS? Like what does that look for? Like what was there's probably one or two things that are like, well, one, this sounds like a good idea, so I want to try it. And two, this data supports that it's a really good idea, so we should try it.
Yeah, great question. Well, the initial pilot study wasn't particularly successful for them, but that's the first trial. They've done a second one that's come out, I think it was about 6 months ago, and that one's had a 60% increase in estrogen after the procedure. But again, it's not just the stem cells, there's other things that go together. So what I'm saying is it wasn't, when we started it with PRP, then it went to mesenchymal stem cells, then it went to what size stem cells, where do you put them in, what do you add to it to give it a little bit of biological adhesion. And that takes time. You can't just do it out of fact. But initially it was a little bit of a result, but didn't quite sort of have any oomph to it. And seeing that, we're like, okay, how do you keep that result working stronger? And we found the solution for the cells to actually adhere to whatever other organ we're trying to. So
you're talking about the stem cells adhering, in this case, to the ovaries, right? Like that's typically what you're targeting. Where could you get stem cells out of the body? Like stem cells, I think, are all over, but in low quantities. And where do you currently get them, and why there?
Where can you get them? All over the body. Okay, so the traditional ones are the adipose tissue, would be the traditional one, or the bone marrow, from the bone marrow. There are B cells that go around in the blood, and there's stem cells everywhere, but you've got to have concentration. We take stem cells from the top of the hip bone, mesenchymal stem cells, they're multipotent, and we centrifuge them down to get the concentration and the size that we want. So I'm not going to tell you those on the screen right now, but sorry. But we get that, and then from there, we take those because they're the best concentration for what we want. Then we apply those to a follicular organ, ovaries, skin, whatever it is.
And in PRP, there are actually some stem cells, right? Typically, some PRP, there's some type of stem. What are can kind of walk us through what are the different types of stem cells that you might have used, and why'd you hone in on what you're using?
We used autologous because as opposed to allogenic. So autologous means your own stem cells as opposed to allogenic. The main reason is because it's your own stem cells, and aging is a condition. It is not an illness. As you're getting old, it's your body getting old. And so what we did is we chose allogenic. We thought it would be easier for regulation, morality, technically, a number of reasons easier. But obviously to do that, you have to then screen the patient to make sure that they don't have anything bad with them or sort of adverse, I think would be the probably more correct term, with them. So that's what we did. And we chose mesenchymal stem cells because they are the most potent that you can get without them being sort of umbilical cord. That's basically it.
Is that on your radar? Like to if anybody, because I know that's becoming more and more common, that they might actually have some umbilical cord stored. Has that come up yet?
We've talked about it, but we're not doing anything because we've got to run through the results first. You've got to do the first batch first and see what the results are and say, right, this is working, that's not working. Then we go to the next stage. If you keep leaping around, I'm going to do that and do this, you're not getting the results. So for instance, we know that if we and we'll talk about how we qualify the candidates, but if you don't prepare them correctly, you're not going to get as good a result. And that's really obvious when you think about it, but it's how you do it that really matters. And so you say, how are you going to prepare them? How are you going to make it happen? So with that case, yeah, I've spoken to some of my fellow scientists, probably some have been on your podcast even, who say, yeah, do this, do that. But we can't. We've got to stick with what we're doing first, get through it. And then phase 3, yeah, we'll look at that. But also, if we can show that autologous stem cells, your own stem cells, everything just from your own body, can realistically give you an extra, even 5 years of vitality. What's that? What's that worth to you? It's just, I mean, it's a no-brainer. And then it's also your own body. So it's not like there's just totally yourself. So that's why we chose autologous. But a lot of the orthodoxy is that you shouldn't use your own stem cells. You're getting old. It's going to fall apart. And so you should use, umbilical cord stem cells. But we're sticking with this. And until our results come out, we'll then decide from that. That's what we're going to do.
You actually include other things. I think exosomes, right? As you're kind of doing these injections, stem cell injections. How does that come apart? Did you try some just stem cell and didn't see results? And you're like, well, what do we know about stem cells? Like, we know that exosomes will actually help them in as you described, stick to the organ that we're targeting.
Right. Yeah. So great question. There was a paper, and I should probably know this off the top of my head, but forgive me, there's a paper that showed that trying to get that stem cells could differentiate into ova when attached to the ovary. However, they needed to attach longer. I thought, well, how do you attach them? And of course, exosomes are a signaling system, right? So instead of taking the exosomes of your menopausal stem cells, you take them from a different source, which is more agnostic. So all it acts like is an adhesive. And so we tried it to see how that would work, and we tried it on skin to see how that would work, skin and over the follicular. And it appears, when again we're still in this phase of, I haven't got all the results. That's why I haven't been speaking it. We're waiting for it to come through. But it appears that it is sticking long enough to at least have some effect for it to be able to differentiate and produce increased follicles and so on and so forth. It appears.
Well, that makes perfect sense, because one of the things I interviewed STEM Regen Christian
Grappler.
I can't remember his last
Christian Grappler.
Yeah. And in that interview, in preparing for it, I saw a video, and I think he had referenced it in some talk that he did, where they actually stripped away the muscle tissue from like a rat heart and then just dripped stem cells on it. And then not only did the rat heart like reform, right? So you just had this kind of translucent heart sitting there. Not only did the stem cells turn into heart muscle cells, they then started beating. And in that situation, what you're describing is they stuck around long enough to know that they were supposed to become heart cells, because a stem cell can become any cell in your body. And so now you're just saying, okay, well, it doesn't work so well when and we don't have any confidence that it is sticking around. How do we get it to stick? I think that makes that
exactly
like
right.
Obvious.
Exactly right. And it's the thing is that logic would say you would have the signaling system for a mesenchymal stem cell to attach to it, but no. Because what it will do is light attracts light, so they wouldn't attach to the other cell, the other organ. It would just attach and go off and do whatever it's supposed to do. And we don't always know what they were going to do. So what you're trying to do is just a bit like, I suppose, a bit like blindfolding them, isn't it? And just sticking them next to give them long enough. That's exactly how we thought. That's exactly what we did. And so far, it seems to be working so far.
So one of the things you mentioned a little bit earlier about kind of you've got to have the right preparation. So you're thinking about a patient who's interested in stem cell injections. Are all of your patients initially targeting fertility, or are now some maybe targeting some other things like maybe PCOS or whatever? Is it straight fertility for your clinics?
So when we started, it was all about women wanting to have children who are either menopausal or very late perimenopausal, and the average age was mid-50s and above. In the last 2 years, the age has gone way down to sort of mid-40s and falling, because people are realizing that its prevention is better than cure. So if you can extend it, it's much better than actually reversing it, which is not always. There's a lot of issues with that as well. So people have come to us, they fall into two categories. One is wanting children, and one is wanting to maintain the ability to be fertile that has the benefits of being fertile, the vitality, the energy, the density, bone density, the skin, suppleness, etc. And there is now beginning to be recognition that this really does happen. And so, wait a minute, why don't we do something about it before it happens? Okay, so they're coming to us now, which is great, because it means now people are having much more realistic expectations. They don't expect us to be miracle workers, and they're desperate, and it's very hard because you're dealing with people and you're having to really manage expectations, because we're not gods, we're scientists, right? There's a big difference. And so the thing is that, we found that it was about 50-50. It's now going more. I actually haven't looked at the exact figures recently, but it's probably pushing towards 70-30, which is longevity over having children, because people are realizing what that means, and that's what's happening.
Well, and some of that is, okay, so as there's a lot of bioidentical hormone replacement in women going into menopause, and this is ostensibly an alternative to that, right? Is that some of the patient base?
Yeah, it is. It is. What we found was in phase one, we started off, we had everything lined up in 2019, in 2019, beginning of 2020. We're going to go into the first group of people, and of course we had the joys of the lockdown. So suddenly we had a group of people that we couldn't get into the procedure. What are we going to do with them? How have we helped them? Everyone's quite nervous, right? How do we help them? And so we thought, okay, let's get them really fit, physically fit. Let's get them their diet checked. Let's get their emotional state checked, just to think about how they're feeling. And so that's what created the sort of planning. We discovered that it was far more effective than we thought. When everyone thought, okay, you do the blood work, you pass the test, put them into the procedure, it's fine. Actually, it makes more sense to prepare that person for a little bit longer. It's a bit like running a marathon. You don't just run a marathon, you train for it. So why not just do a 90-day cycle, check their diet, check their exercise, check what they're doing, where it works vis-a-vis there. And we've improved upon that now, much more in depth. We have the genetic tests, and then in genetic tests, we have gut biome tests, or whatever is required at the time, and we have a comprehensive report, and that really gives people a sort of baseline for them to work with. But what we discovered is how effective that was in terms of reducing cortisol levels, even increasing estrogen levels. Wow, how did that happen? And then obviously a lot of the people that come to us are very accomplished in their own right, and they have a lot of them in the medical profession, scientists. So sometimes we're learning from them, and they're like, okay, they do. So one of them had a stress management technique that we adopted because her cortisol levels were so low. How did you do that? And she explained, and we're like, okay, can we borrow that? Absolutely. Here you go. And so we started to incorporate it and learn from that. And that's what we did. And so then the first thing we do now is, before you can do anything, we do a baselining, because everyone says, I need this. Well, why do you need this? Why do you want to have this? What is the reason? Oh, because I need to have this, and this. Well, have you checked this reason for doing it? We're not judging. We're not sort of passing judgment. We're saying you've got to take a step back. This is a decision you're making. Just take a step back. What's the harm in an extra few weeks? And in actual fact, that goes so quickly. Oh, I can't do 12 weeks. It'd be too long. And then next thing, that week 12 comes along and I haven't done everything yet. Can I do another 4 weeks extension? Almost always. So that's what we did. And that's what we mean by preparation. Now, yeah, it only takes you so far, but there is no substitute for the basics. I mean, if you don't have a good diet or do good exercise or good social life or good social sort of balance and emotional health, you're not going to go. It's going to be tough. And I know it's not so snazzy or fancy, and it isn't like in the sort of in the lab, but that's the foundation of everything. And that's what we do.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
And I think I saw in an interview you had some kind of pretty spectacular results, kind of because of COVID. I'll let you talk about that in a second. But this has a parallel. I'm interviewing people, plastic surgeons, who are like, "Hey, we want to start on some foundational things before we even do the surgery, and then we want to keep those foundational things going." A dentist, Dr. Dom, a dentist in Germany, like you've got a full kind of biohacking protocol that you're going into before he starts working on you. And this just makes everything better. Like if you make you better and then you do the thing that you're trying to accomplish, right, that's going to get you to where you want to go, then it's just going to be better. Also, if they carry those things into the rest of their life, that's going to be better. So it's pretty phenomenal. Talk a little bit about, because I know pandemic shut you down. You're like, okay, what are we going to do? At least we can kind of keep them moving in the right direction. And that had some pretty fantastic results, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's very, I'm going to qualify that. It's a very small sample size. And you got to be really careful about, oh, we had a couple of great results and suddenly we're changing the world. No, we're not. It is just, we just got lucky. But you look at those results. We had one lady started menstruating again after 4 years being menopausal without even doing the procedure. That being said, that was over 9 to 10 months of really intense exercise and diet and stress management and emotional management. We didn't have any success with anyone else apart from that in that way, but that was pretty impressive. And she was 60 years old, which is pretty impressive. But again, it's not like, it hasn't stayed in that way all the way. At one point you have to go to some form of procedure, but it was a great sort of confidence booster that we're looking at the right direction. We had another lady who had a child, but it was with an egg donor though, right? That was unfortunate. She came to us and wanted to do it, and then she ended up having an egg donor, but noticed that they carried the baby to full term, everything fine, but the ovaries had increased in size, of follicles had actually increased after the procedure. So she was thinking about another success for us, but again, very limited. It's just only one person. Yeah,
I appreciate the scientific integrity, which is like, hey, we got great results, and I'm happy to talk about them. But understand that this is a really small set.
Yeah.
This doesn't is one of your thought processes like this might be an alternative to kind of in general IVF situations, and talk about like what are the problems and what are the solutions that people tend to choose, right? And this is in the case of where, when you're looking at fertility issues, you've got the male component, the female component. You're addressing when it looks more like a female issue than it is the male sperm quality or whatever. So talk about like what do people currently do? What do those solutions look like?
We're not a fertility company. We're a longevity company that is based around the ethos of fully functioning reproductive organs, right? So in other words, what makes you a man is muscles, balls, chest hair, deep voice, right? That also is designed for you to share your genes with a female and blend them. And women have breasts and hips and hair and all that stuff. So what happens is those characteristics that make you sexually reproductively available or profitable, whatever it is, that those also have the principle of giving you vitality and strength. So our logic is extend that period of fertility. Now, with women, there's a very clear rate determining step of menopause. With men, we think we're invincible. We fall off a cliff at 18. We just don't know that, you know. But there's also actually, strangely enough, it's harder with men, weirdly enough. But with women, it's like you can clearly see that there could be steps that you could mitigate, reverse, and work with. And that's what we worked on with women. And also, most of the longevity stuff that you look at, it's all based around men. So it's all male driven. It's not, what about women? I mean, what about, there's 50% of the world of women, you know, I mean, they run half the world, you know, let's be frank. And so let's acknowledge that and let's make that work. And so that's how we went into that area. But it's not about fertility and having children. And what we discovered initially was people that would take us up on this are those who wanted to have children who were classified as too old for IVF. Now, I'm not going to sort of say what I think of IVF. I just don't think that's my place to say that. But it has its purpose and it has its uses and it works and it makes people happy and it can work. But it does have its limitations. But everything does have its limitations. This can work as an addition to, so prior to having IVF, would be the way we would suggest it. So increase your estrogen levels, increase your follicles, reduce your FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, reduce that, make yourself more fertile than you can be, and then perhaps do IVF. But again, we're not an IVF company. We don't do that. It's not our area. But that's what we do. So I don't think it's about, I think thinking about fertility is about longevity, is what it's about, or about vitality and keeping yourself, you know, sort of vital and strong for the next, you know, having a second adulthood, another 50 years, you know, bang.
Yeah, and I think the data is really clear. This is where, you know, in my intro, I mentioned, you know, a significant extension of life. I think the data on maintaining a woman maintaining her cycle later into life, postponing menopause, has a dramatic impact on longevity.
Yes.
Right?
So there are some studies that show that for every year, let's do 5 years because it's really 5 years later than the average of menopause. So the average American female goes through menopause at 51. If she went through menopause at 56, she will on average live 11 years longer, right?
Wow.
But again, you got to be
there's a lot to that.
With this data, right? But the thing here though is there are very clear correlations that show that if you go through menopause later, your bone density will stay stronger longer. So if you got skeleton, we call, so aging is based around three things: bones, energy, and hydration, right? So fundamentally, the bones, you've got to keep them strong. So the later you go through menopause, the later you will start to lose bone density. Now, not everyone loses bone density at the same rate, and there's all these, you know, variable factors. But if you just take a mean, it means that by just adding an extra year or two of that vitality will have knock-on effects down the road in terms of the aging process. So therefore, you will live longer by default on that. However, again, and I'm banging on about this day, it's obviously one of my days about this, is like, people say, well, what about cancer? What about this? And what about that? And there are things that you have to be aware of. But fundamentally that research does show that. And so, you know, it works. And if you look at people who go through menopause later, they tend to live longer. I mean, maybe it's more anecdotal, but again, that's what we're seeing.
This just popped in my head. I don't know that I've shared with you. We have a number of testimonials where women who were menopausal and hadn't had their period for a number of years started our product and actually started their cycle again.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so maybe there's some collaboration we need to kind of focus on there. That's kind of cool. So, are you the guy in there pulling the stem cells? Like, how do you put this whole company together? Because maybe you are, or my picture is maybe you're probably not. You're like the strategist and going, hey, we need to do this. This makes sense. Let's do this. Where's your role? Do you get to roll up your sleeves and put on rubber gloves and do stuff, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I obviously have done stem cell extractions, but in this area, no, I don't. There is a surgeon, a full surgical team based in the different clinics. They're the ones to do everything. Think of me as like I designed the plane, and these guys are the pilots that fly the plane, kind of thing. And so what we've done is created a formula, a procedure, and so obviously they're all qualified, insured, and FDA or whatever country's FDA regulation they have. They're all covered in that way. But obviously we've gone through the process. We did dry runs before and how it was all going to work out. But fundamentally, a lot of the technology that we're using is as standard as possible. So standard extraction, standard sort of surgical techniques that are as least invasive as possible, the least amount of anesthetic, not sort of full anesthetic, propofol, something really as much as low as you can make it, so not low, as standardized as you can make it. That's what we're trying to do, because the less variables you have, the more chance of success that you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're pulling from the stem cells from the hip. Is that the easiest place? Is that
most concentrated? The best concentration.
Okay.
And it's real time. It's you're there. It happens as your line is literally. It happens really quickly at the time. We process it and put it back in, so it's in real time.
So we've been talking about kind of injecting this into ovaries. Have you? Is injecting it into testes on the radar? Is that even not worth trying?
They're much more tricky. Actually, they're much more tricky testes. Yes, there will come a time, but we haven't just gone down that road fully yet. We're looking at it, and we've been working with people. But they work on different cycles to ovaries. And they're much more volatile. We get seminoles with tubules. It's a lot more, in many ways, a lot more complicated. Think of it like a cell phone with all of the stuff in it, as opposed to a PC tower. It has all the same equipment, but it's not so spread out. So yeah, we will do, but not for the moment.
And ovaries tend to be a little bit more static, right? So you've got continual sperm production, and that's got to be some sort of cycle that has an impact.
And it's true. So we're sticking with what we know. I mean, it does, we can do something, but again, it's a matter of working through what we're doing. What we've decided to do instead is to look at skin rejuvenation, because aesthetic maintenance is the first barrier. It's the first barrier to aging as well. And so by having supple skin that heals, doesn't have lots of scar tissue, if you can do that, then that makes more sense, and men can have that too. So we have a few people doing that, but that's really, it's not a product that we offer directly to people at the moment. We're still in trials on it.
Are you going to use your anti-aging algae byproduct as part of a skin? Are you going to pull back from your early parts of your career?
Well, we have actually got some serum that we made that we still have a big vat of it, and we make this sort of face serum that's hyaluronic acid with water and some citrus oils and propane diols, and we do make it. And we actually offer it to our customers just for free as a gift. So, but we don't sell it on the market, really.
All right. So I think this is something that you're really passionate about, the concept of Freudenspanne, right? What is it? Why do you think it's important?
Okay. So what we discovered was that in the during the lockdown, some people were very panicked about the lockdown. Some people were really calm. But why was one person panicked? Why was another person calm? And we realized that the emotions they can have effects in your body and actual physical effects in your body. Cortisol levels, adrenaline spikes, so on and so forth. So rather than try and say all things to all people, we focused on the emotional state as it relates to your reproductive system. So if we can keep you in the best possible state to reduce your cortisol, which makes you temporarily infertile, reduce your adrenaline, whatever it is, we can make that work. And so we devised a test just to see what questions. We just started spitballing one day, the team. Oh, what about this? What about that? And we just came up with a test. And we found that from this, we could work out, say, for instance, your OCD, and you hate the book on the corner of your coffee table, the other side. If I want to just spike your cortisol, I just turn the book around like that. So if I know that happens, what we do is we acknowledge that for the patients. So make sure that they have the least amount of stress possible. So half of what we do is hey, take it easy, it's fine. They'll say, well, we've got to do this and we've got to do that. We must get this by this date. No, it's okay. You can wait a couple of days. It's all right. It's fine. And it's much easier when it's not your issues. When it's someone else's, when it's your issues, you're like, oh, if it was me, I'd be like all over the place. When it's someone else, you can be more calm. And so we call it Freudenspanne, which is the quantitative effects emotions have on the biomarkers of aging. And, why do people die of a broken heart? Why do people's hair fall out overnight? In fact, when you saw me at Biohacker, I had another bereavement, and my hair started to thin out at that point. That was purely stress related. Absolutely. And then it comes back again. So if you can work that out and mitigate that, we think that emotions in terms of, look, we're not machines, we're human beings, we have emotions. So, why is it that you can talk by yourself sing in front of the mirror in the bathroom? Oh yeah, great. But in front of a bunch of people on stage, you clam up, right? Why? What's the difference? It should be no different to you. And that's mitigating or understanding the emotions, but we stay only in our field, in our lane. We don't try and do all the things. We just stay in our lane of fertility. We would love people to collaborate with in different areas. And we're finding people coming to us in this area about Freudenspanne and saying, hey, yeah, we could do it for this. Fantastic. You've got a PhD in psychology. Fantastic. Let's go for it. And that's what's happening. But we started in that area and that's what we do. And I think it's something that we tend to omit. I've got to take all these tablets. I've got to do all these tests and I've got to wake up at 4 a.m. and check my cortisol response. Mate, your cortisol response has gone up because you got up at 4 a.m. It's obvious when you think about it, but so that's what we're doing. We're formulating, we have been formulating the categories and the reasoning behind this, 8 sort of sections to it. And it would take too long to go into it fully, I don't think right now, but it's part of our report that we give the patient.
So is that test available online? Can people find it and take it? Because it sounds interesting.
Yeah, I knew you'd say that. So
that's my job.
yeah. I was like, I got to. So the answer is no. At the moment, no. What we're going to do, though, is the 35% variable of the test, because you have to have, to make it work, you have to have hard data. So you can't do the test without blood work or certain other areas, but you can do elements of the test, of the 8 sections, which were more emotional and subjective. So that test, we're thinking about putting one online. We haven't done it yet, but we will do at some point. But you can't do the whole test without having the full range of blood work. A DNA test would be really helpful. For genetic tests, there's a number of other bone scans, whatever. But yeah.
I may need to put you together with my friend Patrick Wanis, who is a human behavior expert and kind of would be, I think, amazing contact for kind of stress management and ideas. And he used to kind of focus on hypnosis and hypnotherapy, which is, I think, a very good skill. And that's not what he does now, but he does some pretty amazing stuff. I might actually kind of put that together.
Yeah, and I think. Sorry, I was just say, I think the thing about this is interesting is that there's a lot of cross-pollination of different disciplines. in this area. And I think if we can focus on keeping you the fertility or the ability for that for a period of time, and however we do that, how we keep you as great as you can be for that period of time. And a lot of it is things like behavioral, which some of us, we have one psychologist on the team, but only one. The more the merrier. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think what I'm potentially hearing is, right, fertility as a proxy for longevity, and maybe that shifts later, and maybe you've got the collection of like, here are the 10 biomarkers that we really need to look like, and they tend to support fertility but aren't actually fertility. But in the meantime, fertility is a great proxy for understanding longevity, and it certainly applies. Like, the data is very clear of how that applies for women and their relationship time-wise with menopause. So that it's a very viable approach to longevity. I think it's very smart. I'm excited about what you guys are doing. You have a number of clinics, right? Like, if somebody were to, hey, this is something I want to try, what do they do and what would they experience first?
Well, the first thing they do is go to our website and schedule a consult, because once you've got that set up, we then have one of our consultants come back to them, and we have a sort of a much more personalized response. We take them through the procedure, why they're doing it. So a quick, almost like a 25, 30-minute phone call, say, why are you doing this? And that's the first thing. So that would be the first experience that I have, is questioning why they even contacted us. so then,
okay.
And then after that, if they decided they want to progress, then we would start off with a 1-hour consult like this on camera, which was recorded, and we go through the procedure, we go through the timings, we go through the costs, we go through a number of things that they'll go through, and then also all the time we're taking information about them, because we are going to use that information going forward. So all the notes, that little quirks they might have, where they grew up, that whatever there is in the conversations, are all very conversational, but obviously recorded. And then from that, if they want to proceed, they then do a series of forms, fill them out. The Freudenspanne test, they do the blood work, they do DNA tests. A lot of them have been done already, so we have existing stuff that we can work with. And then from that, we then have another 1 hour consultation via video, where we collate all the data and the previous one together. We've had time to sort of understand them, and then we develop a 20, 25-page report that gives you the some markers of what you can do with your diet, exercise, supplements, and Freudenspanne going forward. And that's what we do. And then from that point, we recommend you can come do Rejuvenate with us, with the stem cell stuff. We could do something like young plasma, whatever it might be. And if we're not right, we'll say we're not right. You should go somewhere else, and we'll recommend somewhere else. Yeah. And that's what we do. So
it sounds like they have lots of time to be comfortable and familiar with what you think is right for them, why you think it's right for them, and what that's going to look like.
Yep.
All right, so we've come time for our wrap-up questions. I think we could have talked on so many different things, could have gone down fun rabbit holes. I feel like we did a good job staying on task. So our wrap-up questions, the first one is, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
No, I don't. I don't. And you know why? If you worry about dying, you're afraid to live. And so fundamentally, do I think I can live for a certain age? Yeah, I do. What is that number? I don't have a number. I mean, okay, you want a number from me, right? Okay, you want a number. Okay. 110. There you go.
110. I like it. And how long do you think humans can live?
I'd say that's a more interesting question. In our current state, as is, without augmentation, without a bunch of other things like that, you as a body as is like now, I think with current technology within our lifetimes, 130 maybe, I think there will be a real sort of block at around about 88, 90. So as you start to genetically sort of age and unravel, that will be a sticking point. If you get past that, it'll get to the next, and then it will be sort of mental aspects and stuff like that. So I'd say 100, 125, 150, I'd say. I mean, I would say you could argue 500, but just keep it with what we have right now.
Yeah. My thought process is always like there's what's currently available and what I think is going to be available a lot faster than people realize. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everyone likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span that you can share?
Eat well, right? And know your food. That's the building. You really got to know your food. Mm-hmm. And also make a virtue out of a necessity. So if you need to eat, so learn how to cook. And so now you can have the fun of cooking with your family, your friends, and you have a social environment, and that is worth, it's priceless. I mean, hanging out with your mates and you're doing, your family, that's really good. People don't appreciate the simple things in life, the really simple, basic things. So eat well, and also I think try at least to allocate a portion of your day every day to some part of it to yourself, like love thyself first, but then pay it forward. Always pay it forward somehow. Even if it's a small thing, like helping someone to pick up a bag of shopping or just something like that they can't do. However mundane it seems, it has a really good effect on your just general well-being. They're the 2 protocols I would do, and they're cheap to do as well. They're easy. Know your food, love thyself, and pay it forward. And maybe one of the best ways to love thyself is to pay it forward. Yeah. I think that's great. Yeah. What are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span? Well, I think they focus too much on the number, way too much on the number. Like, I'm going to live to 150. Well, that's great, but in what state? And obviously that's the first thing. I think looking at, yes, you have a distant idea of where you want to be, but you should focus on the present and focus on keeping yourself in that present. And I think sometimes people forget that, number 1. Number 2, I think a lot of people get very hung up on supplements, technologies, this and that, and they don't tend to look at the underlying factor. And so sometimes taking a step back, just relaxing and just looking at it, can be far more beneficial. And, it's sort of, that's something I notice people do, because that also can affect your quality of life and your systems. I think they're the 2 things that I would say pretty much. Yeah. So 1, like focusing on the number too much, and 2, like I kind of jotted down, focusing externally instead of internally, like an internally can be the physical body. I think that's really good. Zack, how can people contact you? You can go to our website, austinbiotec.com. I'm sure the links will be at the end of the program. So we have you can schedule a consult, just message us, and there's a button on top of the website. And that way, someone will contact you directly, and you can have a personalized conversation. We don't blanket lots of information everywhere. We will give you the information once you speak to us. But really, the main reason for that is too much information. I mean, it's way too much, and it overloads people. We do have some social media, which we do, but we're building that up. But it's a full-time job, as you know. So the best way is the website. Just contact us, and if you're serious, we're going to help. Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about? Going back to see my family in Greece, actually. Yeah, that's been very soon, yeah. As you were kind of describing know your food, learn to cook in that environment, it just felt very Greek to me, right? Like this is, from whatever exposure we have, my big fat Greek wedding, like that feels very much like that. And I think if you look at the blue zones, that is also the impression I have of the blue zones, right? Where it is this big family, whether it's maybe not as ruckus as the Greeks if you're in Japan, but right, like it's still getting together as a family and really connecting over food. Like I think that's amazing. Well, you can find Zack at Austin Biotec. So that's Austin, the city, BIOTEC, right? Yeah. TEC.com. Yeah. And you can look for him on social media. You can also look for him at the Biohacker Expo. He's going to be speaking there. I put the dates at the beginning. We'll probably include that in the notes. Zack, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.